Hey guys, welcome back to Jess Marie's Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be talking about Persuasion. So, recently Crystal, one of my great friends, asked if I would like to be a part of the live show where we would all read Persuasion by Jane Austen, and I thought it would be really fun to read Persuasion for the very first time. Yes, I've never read Persuasion. Actually, I've never read any Jane Austen before. We'll get to that in a minute, but I felt really excited to actually read Persuasion for the first time before the Netflix adaptation came out, which I just watched this morning. So in this review, I am going to talk about my thoughts about Persuasion, the book, reading it for the first time, not having like a background in reading classics like Jane Austen. I never gravitated towards them. The only classics I've read were assigned reading in school, and also I have read North and South, which I completely forgot about until I started talking to Crystal and Jen. I'm like, oh no, I did read North and South. I did read that book by Elizabeth Gaskell, I think, a couple years ago, but classics have never been something that I wanted to read. I was a reader very young, and I had already formed my opinions on what genres like interested me, and it wasn't classics. I was already fully immersed in fantasy, and then YA paranormal romance, like of course Twilight, The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare, and Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead, and that informed my reading experience from a very young age. So I was not gravitating towards classics, but I wasn't unaware of them, obviously. So Juliet Cross is my aunt, and she was a great lover of BBC adaptations of the classics, and that's actually how I was exposed to them. I love the BBC adaptations of Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, Emma. Like, I own all of them on DVD, which I don't even own a DVD player anymore, but like I would rewatch these over and over and over again. I really love them. Funnily enough, Persuasion was one that I have never watched before, so this was a completely new experience, a new story, new characters to me, and I want to talk about what I thought about them. So let's talk about Persuasion, the book, first. So I originally set out to read this physically, actually. So I got this copy, which I think is really pretty, and I love like the gold foiling and the quotes and stuff on the background. And I think this is Wordsworth, the Wordsworth edition. That's what this is. So they have like a lot of bound classics, and I thought it was really cute. So anyway, I was like, I'm going to read this physically, take notes, which I did take notes for about half of the book. I also had this as an ebook version as well. It's like, it was on sale from Amazon for like 29 cents. But I ended up by going with the audiobook to complete my read of this. And I think that for somebody who is not used to reading classics, the pacing can feel a little bit slow, and I found that the audiobook was a great help for that. I flew through it once I decided to go on AnyPlay, saw Persuasion was on there, and picked up where I left off, and it was fantastic because I finished it like within that day pretty much. So I highly recommend the audiobook to anyone trying to dive into classics and find that it's a little bit of a struggle reading it. And I say it was a little bit of a struggle. It's mostly to do with the style of writing that Jane Austen does. When lots of people who are not a part of the romance community, they're like the outsiders looking in, they think of historical romance, they think of Jane Austen, but in terms of romance as a genre, this isn't a romance. Like Crystal said, Jane Austen was writing contemporary fiction at the time. There's very little instances where the characters are on page interacting with each other and having like dialogue. And Jane Austen has a commentary about much more than the actual couple. It's about families and perception, prejudice. Again, she loves writing about that. Different social classes, what people find acceptable in marriages. Who's an acceptable mate for a person of this standing, this station? And I feel like that's what she's actually commenting on. It's not technically the romance between Anne Elliot and Captain Wentworth. So for a romance reader reading Persuasion, it was kind of a little bit difficult to feel invested and not let myself get distracted, because that's exactly what happened. I would read a page and be like, what's on my phone? And I would start like looking at my phone. I was very easily distracted while trying to physically read this book, because I felt like Jane Austen herself goes off on tangents that were not interesting to me as a romance reader. I'm like, well, where's Wentworth? I want to see interactions with him. I want to see what he's saying. Well, he doesn't say that much. Overall, my reading experience of Persuasion was great. Would I pick up, did it make me want to pick up like another Jane Austen? No, it didn't, because it's just not the type of writing that I like to read. That doesn't mean that I don't enjoy the story itself. So let's move on to adaptations of classics. I very much enjoy adaptations of classics, and I think, like I said, the BBC does fantastic adaptations. They usually stay very close to the source material. So I feel like it's okay if I don't want to consume classics by reading them, I can enjoy the story and Jane Austen's social commentary just as well if I watch those adaptations. So what I did after I finished reading Persuasion, I decided I wanted to actually watch the movies. And there's many different versions of Persuasion out there. Jen was the one who said that the BBC one obviously was her favorite, and it's this one right here, the 2007 version. So I got to watch it thanks to some troubleshooting help from Jen. I had to add on a channel for Amazon for BritBox to be able to watch this one, because you cannot purchase any of the BBC adaptations digitally, which is very annoying because I'd actually really like all of the adaptations that I own in DVD. I'd like them in digital form, but I can't have them. So I watched this one and I really, really enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed watching Persuasion more than I enjoyed reading it. And that is the honest truth. I was very invested in the story. I thought it was a very true to the book adaptation. I think that if you only want to watch Persuasion, you will get everything that you're meant to get out of reading Persuasion. It was just really great. The performances were great. There were a couple instances of shaky cam that like really, I was like, blah, I can't watch this type of thing. But overall, the production quality is always pretty great for BBC adaptations. So like I said, right now my ranking is BBC adaptation in first place and Persuasion, the book itself, in second place. Then I watched this morning Netflix's take on Persuasion, which is very different. And this is something that I talked to Crystal just a little bit about, because tonight we're going to have the live show and discuss Persuasion. And Crystal, who has read like a lot of Jane Austen's and other classics as well, she just has a lot more knowledge about Jane Austen herself too. So I'm very excited that we get to talk about that tonight. But Crystal was saying that she wasn't truly excited about Netflix's version because it doesn't seem to capture the tone of Persuasion, the book, like what Crystal has described as a melancholy book. And Elliot is 27 years old and she's unmarried. She is firmly on the shelf in terms of, society. Never hoping to get married because her father and Lady Russell convinced her when she was 19 and first met Captain Wentworth that it would be not an advantageous match. Her father is extremely prideful. He's a baronet, which is the lowest title that you can be in England, I believe. Or maybe it's a knight. Maybe knights are underneath. I'm not sure. I might have that backwards. But he believes himself to be a man of great importance, and he only wants to attach himself to others who he deems are also of great consequence and could elevate the Elliot name. He has a grand opinion of the Elliot name. And in fact, the book opens with him reading a book that literally has like a list of all, like, I think it's a list of all the baroncies. But it's kind of like when you read historical romance, sometimes you'll hear a mention of Debrett's because it's a list of all of the aristocratic families and their connections, how old their title is and all that jazz. And he loves reading about himself. He's quite the narcissist. So when Anne Elliot, as a 19-year-old, is falling in love with this nobody, he doesn't have any connections, he is going out to sea, he doesn't have like a title, he's starting out the lowest of the low, but he is ambitious and he's just like, it doesn't matter because I'm going to make my fortune. He has so much confidence in what he can accomplish, and Anne wants to marry him, but she really respects the opinion of Lady Russell, who is her mother's best friend, and Lady Russell is just kind of like, that's not the type of life that you want. Like, you could be impoverished like your whole entire life. It's a hard life and he's going to be at sea the whole time. Like, why would you want to attach yourself? Basically just convinced her to not marry Captain Wentworth. Well, everything that Captain Wentworth said he would accomplish, he has. He has come back with accolades attached to his name. He has made his fortune and he is a very eligible bachelor. And he comes back into Anne's life still very mad that she allowed herself to be persuaded against him. And now all of a sudden, there's these very eligible girls who are interested in marrying him. There's families that want to be connected to him, and Anne is just on the sidelines watching this unfold, regretting that this could have been her life, that she could have been happy these past 8.5 years, and she laments that she allowed herself to be dissuaded from this because she still has feelings for him and she's trying to not let it show. And when Crystal was telling me about watching the trailer for Netflix's Persuasion and it not reflecting the tone of the Persuasion that she knows and loves, I totally got that after reading Persuasion, but very much after watching Persuasion. The BBC version, I feel like, hammers home what Crystal calls the melancholiness of this story. It is sad. She is a little bit depressed and she's watching like life unfold around her, and she's just very stagnant. And she has so many regrets about how she handled stuff in the past, and she can't undo them. She has no power to undo this. Saying you're sorry is just not quite enough. And Captain Wentworth still kind of, holds it against her. And she's forced to watch as these other girls throw themselves at him and he accepts their attention. And it's very hard for her. It's very hard for her. I really felt for Anne Elliot. The way that Sally Hawkins plays Anne Elliot was perfection. She was perfection. I really loved it. I also really loved all of the side characters, because not only is her father a narcissist, but her older sister Elizabeth is just awful, just plain awful. And her younger sister Mary, who's married to Charles Musgrove, somebody who actually proposed to Anne after Captain Wentworth left and she refused him. Mary is a little bit of an attention-seeking hypochondriac. That's what I would call her. She always feels like she has an ailment. It's never really real, because as soon as she gets attention, all of a sudden she perks up and stuff, and she always requires Anne to be at her side. The actress who played Mary is the same actress, if you've ever watched The White Queen on Stars. She plays Henry Tudor's mom, and she just dives into those characters like so deeply. And I love the way that she played Mary. So dramatic, and she's crazy. And I really loved it. So anyway, the BBC version to me kind of hammered home, for me personally, the melancholiness of the story even more than actually reading it. Like, reading it, I felt sad for Anne Elliot, but I feel like you really get like her deep sense of regret and how hard it is for her to be around him again by watching the movie. Like, I got it more from watching the movie. So, I mean, I do have to say the movie was better than the book. Now let's talk about the Netflix adaptation, because I just finished watching it this morning. Is it a faithful adaptation of Persuasion? I think that the story is still the same. The story is still there. The characters, for the most part, are pretty true to their characters in the book, but I think that the biggest misstep was the character of Anne Elliot herself. So Dakota Johnson plays Anne Elliot, and I don't know that I can just say that it's her performance of Anne Elliot. It's the writing. It's the way that they wrote Anne Elliot in this Netflix adaptation. She's a lot more sarcastic, and also the entire time she breaks the fourth wall. So it's kind of like you're getting like a Dear Diary interpretation of what Anne's thinking. It's all of her inner thoughts, but she's actually speaking those thoughts out loud, with the other characters, for the most part, never hearing what she's saying. Like, it's like they're in a bubble while she's saying her inner thoughts, and they don't really hear her for the most part. It's a very modern type of adaptation, but they changed her character to be a lot more lighthearted than I feel that she is. There's lots of quippy jokes there, and I think that it will land with modern audiences a lot more. And there's absolutely some anachronistic things that are happening that are specifically for modern audiences. One instance, which I can recall very vividly, very early on in the movie, is when they're all having dinner discussing how her father has to start economizing because they're dead broke. And Mrs. Clay, who is a friend of Elizabeth, the oldest daughter, she's a widow, and she's talking about how they say that if you're a 5 in London, then you're a 10 in Bath, because they're talking about removing to Bath, which is less expensive. And I mean, you're a 5, she's a 10, he's a 7, or whatever. Like, that's a very modern notion and a modern phrase. And there are quite a few of those in the movie. I really don't think that Netflix's version is a bad version of Persuasion, because you can tell that it's not trying to be super true to the book. Like, it's not trying to be a faithful adaptation. They are making deliberate choices to separate itself from the book. So I can't say that it's a bad adaptation, but I will say that a misstep that I think that they made is Anne's character, the way that they wrote her. She's a little too silly. She's a little too clumsy. She doesn't seem as affected by the situation as I feel like it warrants her to feel. I feel like she should be a little bit more sad and depressed, and she's not. Or at least the way that Dakota Johnson delivers her lines, it feels very quippy and jokey, just kind of like, oh, this situation doesn't bother me and stuff like that. So Yeah, I don't think that it's bad. I don't hate it, but I also am not super connected to Persuasion as a story. I just recently read this. Now, if we were talking about, adapting like a Lisa Kleypas book that I have read and loved for many years, and they tried to do something like that to Lisa Kleypas, I would for sure probably be ripping this adaptation a new one. And I guess, I wasn't going to bring it up, but I guess you could look at Bridgerton as an adaptation as well, because they are including a few more modern touches than is totally warranted in that adaptation, but they're changing characters a lot. A lot of the characters in Bridgerton, Netflix's Bridgerton, are not the same as they were in the books, and I feel like that's pretty much the same as what's happening with Persuasion. But it's not as bad because I feel like it's just Anne Elliot. I feel like Anne is the only one that really is missing the mark for me. Yeah, so I think that the production value is really high. It's very beautiful, obviously, shot very well. The scenery's gorgeous. And there's one thing that the BBC adaptation actually changed, and it's this conversation that Anne has with one of Captain Wentworth's friends about the constancy of love and like who loves longest. Do men love longest? Are they the most constant, or do women? And she's having this conversation and Captain Wentworth overhears her. In the book, this happens toward the very end, and it's the catalyst for them getting together. In the BBC adaptation, it happens quite early on, and Captain Wentworth does not hear this conversation at all, which I found to be a strange choice because they still did the letter at the end, and that was weird, and she was running around a lot, and I was just kind of like, I kind of prefer it in the book. The Netflix adaptation does it more correctly, according to the book, but also like the feeling was missing just a tad bit. BBC did it better, just plain and simple. So the way that I would rank these versions of Persuasion is I highly recommend you watching the BBC adaptation. It is fantastic. In fact, it put me in a mood to consume even more stories like Persuasion, so I decided to watch, since I had BritBox at my fingertips, I decided to watch one of my favorite adaptations, which is North and South. It is a 4-parter. I was like, oh, it's like 10:30, it's 11. I'll only watch one episode. I'll watch part 1 and end up by watching all 4 parts. And I've seen this 1,000 times. I've seen North and South so many times. It's amazing. I love it. So yeah, it's kind of put me in a mood to just consume all the BBC adaptations right now, which I will do now that I have BritBox. So I look forward to discussing this further with Crystal, Tiffany, and Jen tonight. I'm very excited about where the conversation is going to go and what others' opinions are going to be, because I assume a couple of people will be able to watch the Netflix version today before the live show, but I'm very interested to see what the opinions of people who have known and loved Persuasion for a very long time think of the Netflix adaptation, and what people who don't have any experience in reading Jane Austen, what they think of Persuasion. Do they think that it was worthwhile? Was it fun? Was it enjoyable for them? That's just something that I'm very curious about. But anyway, this was a pretty fun experience for me, and I'm really glad that I did it. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys.